I, today, finished reading my copy of Don Quixote. And, in doing so, I came to a realization. I came to a few realizations. The first is that the ending of Library of RUINA, where Roland is impaled by 12 weapons and sinks into that black silence, that might be a reference to the 12 sinners. And you can look at the weapons, most of which are similar, with a few differences, and chalk that up to the designs of the sinners maybe not being finalized at that point, or mirror world identities use slightly different iterations on the weapons and the themes. But the point is that Roland, in that moment, when he's consumed by the city, when he sinks into that black silence, it's framed as if the city itself, its voice rose up against him. And the thing is when you think of that, what better represents the voices of the city than the 12 sinners? There are also 12 paladins of Charlemagne, but I don't think that was, well, it's the kind of thing that if it doesn't ever get mentioned in full, then that's fine. But another thing that clues me into this is, in the Church of Gears Walpurgisnacht, the full stop office is replaced by the sinners of Limbus Company. And the sinners in Limbus Company, replacing them in this timeline, mean that if the mirror shows us a potentiality of a bad ending of Library of Verona, then the sinners could be the people who slew Roland in that bad ending. I mean, it's all potentiality, sure, but this got me thinking. The only thing that really clued me in as well, as to, it could be potential, but what really made me think more on that is that the other ending with Angela, the Night of the Pale Moon, is referenced. Barry from the Don Quixote canto is referenced, and Don Quixote's canto is really important because the Night of the Pale Moon wakes, through tales of fixes, wakes Don Quixote up to realizing the light of chivalry, or the light of fixes. Much like how in the novel by Cervantes, Don Quixote is enlightened by the Night of the Pale Moon. Well, the Night of the Pale Moon is there as a device to wake Don Quixote up, to try and get Don Quixote to break the quote-unquote illusion. And when thinking about things like that, Don Quixote as a mimetic idea purveys the work. And when Don Quixote in the novel, as Alonso Quijano, dies, on his grave, it reads that Don Quixote triumphed over death, and he forsakes the name Don Quixote as he dies, which means that Don Quixote didn't really die, or rather, in forsaking the name Don Quixote, he wasn't Don Quixote. Looking through that, in the beta artwork for Limbus Company, in some old sprites, Don Quixote, the sinner in Limbus Company now, has Miguel written on her coat for Miguel Cervantes. Miguel Cervantes wrote Don Quixote, but the mimetic idea of Don Quixote was something that stemmed from him. His ideas purvey the work, but if he got those ideas from another person in his journeys of war or through other means, through the works of chivalry that he might have read, to impart those ideas through Don Quixote, through that work, Cervantes was Don Quixote, and Don Quixote is inexorably tied to Cervantes, or rather, Don Quixote is above that. And when you think about that, and when you think about how Don Quixote mimetically imparted the idea of being Don Quixote, he didn't impart, in Limbus Company, he imparts that onto Sancho, but in the novel of Don Quixote, that also happens as well, that the idea imparted onto Sancho is Sancho starts believing in enchantments, kind of, even though Don Quixote, there are parts in which it's sort of vague if Don Quixote is truly aware or truly mad. And the thing is that our framing of these ideas is purely contextual, but I could go on about that. What I wanted to say was these enlightenments. In the last bits of Don Quixote hangs up his armor and says that on a tree as they're going back to La Mancha, and writes, whoever designs to take this armor incurs the wrath of Orlando. And it made me think, the River Lathe gets mentioned in Don Quixote the novel, the Odyssey, Dante's Inferno, all of these things, the River Lathe, everything gets kind of mentioned in Don Quixote. And so it made me realize what Project Moon is. What did the Knight of the Pale Moon seek to do to Don Quixote? Wake Don Quixote up from the illusion. And when you think about how Kim Ji-hoon, through Project Moon, is using all of these things, works on literature, works on religion, works on all of these things, society itself, to create a story using the chivalric works of yore or fantasy stories to tell people about how these reflections of our society function. That's what Project Moon is. And the thing that unites this idea of chivalry, this love, this light itself, that is goodness, that is love, that is a value that's above everything. And in thinking about all these things, all of these ideas are sort of interconnected. And I just find that really funny. Of course, it doesn't have to really, there's a scene in Library of Ruina where you can see Roland's lamenting of Angela, and you can see a baby crib and also items for children. But there's very, very few references to that in Ruina. And I don't know if there's been much mention of Roland having a kid. Hi, okay, sorry, I kind of waffle on for a bit at the end here. Basically, it's all conjecture. All of this is conjecture. All of this is just baseless theory. Well, I elaborate my points in the end. There's a few things that I seek to mention. Okay, the first thing is that within the ending, it says, a man drifts down the gutter. Numerous weapons dig into the man's back. A club that belonged to a stranger, a limb that belonged to a nemesis, a dagger that belonged to a colleague, a lance that belonged to a friend. These countless instruments of harm are the karma he bore. Okay, this could kind of throw this theory like completely out of whack. A club that belonged to a stranger, sure, you could say that's Heathcliff's bat. A limb that belonged to a nemesis. Roland and Greg both fought in the Smoke War. If they fought on opposite sides, a nemesis would fit there. A lance that belonged to a friend. Don Quixote would have been a friend to all fixers and all those who seek to enact chivalry. That tracks. A dagger that belonged to a colleague. Yi Sang has a dagger, but I don't think that he would fit there. That being said, the other thing that really throws it into question is that the weapons themselves not looking 100% is the main thing that really throws it into question, I think. Like, for instance, you could always assume that Rodion would have had an axe, yet there's no clear axe in that picture. Or rather, maybe that's the idea that when Kim knew that he would want a Dostoevsky work to represent one of the 12 sinners, but hadn't explicitly chose Rodion. I could talk more about Rodion, like, at length. In fact, I could talk more about how mimetic ideas pervade, like, religion itself, and how all of these things sort of implicitly interlink, and how we learn a lot of implicitly learnt things through fantasy stories, like goodness and altruism. I could talk about how a lot of these things could just be product of speculation, but, we're all given free will. We can all come to our own conclusions, and the only way we'll know for sure is if, in Limbus Company, if when we eventually get 12 sinners on field, we'll be able to fight Roland in some sort of fight. The other thing is, like, a lot of these are just theories, and I'm probably misremembering stuff, but yeah, I like the idea that Project Moon is a series of works to encourage people to read and learn things and be enlightened and know how the system functions and know how, capital is, well, the system that sort of exists and how it perpetuates evil and, etc. I waffle on a lot. But yeah, anyway, I hope you like my little video. Like, the other videos on this channel are also kind of weird. They're just thoughts. They're just thoughts, really. Yeah. Hi. Bye.